Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar today. We're very excited to present the next hour to you, the top 3 things to know when managing a fleet. My name is Marty Quinn. I'm with National Safety Council. Just a couple of housekeeping things before I turn it over to our presenters. Um, First of all, be aware that this webinar is being recorded. The recording and also the slide deck we will make available to you after this webinar. We also encourage you, if you have questions, to use the Q&A function. And time permitting at the end of the call, we will entertain as many of those questions as we can. I am very honored to introduce to you our main speaker for today. That's Matt Camden. Matt is Senior Research Associate and Group Leader of the Research to Practice and Outreach Group in Virginia Tech Transportation Institute's Division of Freight, Transit, and Heavy Vehicle Safety. Matt's an expert in occupational driving safety with over 15 years experience solving complex challenges to improve vehicle and driver safety. He specializes in developing, evaluating, and implementing occupational safety programs and outreach initiatives to reduce crashes, prevent injuries, and eliminate driving fatalities for all drivers who must drive while in the course of their job. Although much of Matt's research focuses on commercial motor vehicle drivers, his research portfolio encompasses all types of occupational drivers and the individuals that share the road with them. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt, and after Matt gives the bulk of today's presentation, I'm also pleased to have Mike Giroux, a colleague here at NSC, speak to you about new training that we're offering as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you very much, Martin. Happy to be here. Welcome, everyone. Looks like we have a really good audience in attendance today. So also, in addition to my research and to my work at the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute, I am also a member of NSC, just like many of you on this call, and also chair the Motor Fleet Commercial Vehicle section within the National Safety Council's Transportation Division. So I do encourage everyone on the call, if you're not part of the Transportation Division, look into it. We love to have you all as part of that division. It's kind of peer-to-peer exchange, just talking about transportation safety and how we can keep you and your employees safe out on the road when you're going about your jobs. So as Mario mentioned today, we're going to be talking a little bit about driving safety and what we know kind of leads to crashes, close calls, and what you as a fleet can focus on to help reduce your incidents out on the road. My part here is probably going to be about 30 minutes before I pass it off to Michael. So, occupational driving, right? A lot of times when people think about crash risk out on the road, people tend to think about just tractor trailer drivers, people who primary job is to operate a vehicle. But as you all know on this call, there are so many industries, so many occupations where an employee has to drive a vehicle in order to perform their job duties. And in fact, if we look at all the ways people die on the job, vehicle incidents, vehicle crashes are actually the #1 cause of workplace deaths across all industries. Now, with that said, there are a few industries where kind of transportation-related incidents aren't the #1 cause, but by and large, it's things that happen out on the road with our workers that are leading to these really serious fatal events. And if you just kind of look at this graph here, you can see that transportation incidents are by far the biggest cause of fatal occupational injuries, more than falls, slip, trips, more than violence, more than exposure to harmful substances or contacts with other objects or fire or explosion. It accounts for about 37% of all fatal injuries. And unfortunately, this is going up. We're seeing these numbers rise kind of year over year, especially since 2020. You can see a pretty sharp increase in transportation incidents. And it costs people a lot of money. On average, every year, transportation incidents cost companies over $72 billion in the United States. So huge, huge things, right? Really is impacting your bottom line. But it's not just those fatal events. If we look at workers' compensation costs by cause over the past, well, this is kind of most recent data from NSC. So from 2019 to 2022, you can see motor vehicle events are leading to a lot of workers' comp costs. Again, more than everything else, more than burns, slip, trips, and falls, struck by objects, all of that stuff. So transportation is impacting pretty much all industries out there. And it's leading to people being injured and people being killed on the job. So when we're talking about occupational drivers, oftentimes we talk about professional drivers, right? And a lot of times people just think of a professional driver as a truck driver, as a bus driver, as a transit operator, essentially people whose only job is to drive a vehicle. But really, professional drivers are so much more. And it's kind of what I was getting at before. If you have an employee who needs to drive a vehicle in order to perform their primary job duties, they are also a professional driver. So that could be people driving your fleet of vehicles, whether you own them or you rent them, or it could be your employees driving their own vehicle out to a work site or to perform their primary job duties. And those are called, that's a gray fleet. So all of these people who are driving in order to perform their job, we need to consider a professional driver. And what we know just by doing some research and looking at what research other people have done is that professional drivers are at an increased risk of being involved in an event on the roadway. So a couple of reasons. One, professional drivers tend to drive more than the average everyday adult driver in the United States. They're putting on more miles on their vehicle. And we know that the more exposure, the more miles somebody drives, they're more likely to be involved in situations where they could either hit an object or another vehicle, or somebody could hit them. We also know that professional drivers may be unfamiliar with their vehicles, and research has shown that when people are unfamiliar with their vehicles, whether that's a fleet-owned vehicle or a rental vehicle, they're more likely to crash. We also know that fleet vehicles may have different dynamics compared to what our employees used to be driving in their personal vehicle. So we also know, last thing is that when people don't own a vehicle, they drive different. Whether, again, it's a fleet-owned vehicle or a rental. Some research that was conducted by the AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety found that when people were driving and operating a vehicle they did not own, AAA found that there was a 15% higher fatal crash rate. And we also found that when there was a rental vehicle involved, there was a 20% higher fatal crash rate. So people are doing things different, whether that's because they're taking more risks or because they're just not familiar with how that vehicle operates and where those controls in that vehicle are. So this could be your professional drivers out there operating a vehicle that they may not necessarily be familiar with. So when we are doing research with companies to help improve transportation safety, typically we are focusing on kind of three countermeasures. And we know that across all occupational safety and health programs, these three countermeasures are really important. We call them the three E's. It's education, engineering, and enforcement. So to have a well-rounded roadway safety program, you really need to focus on all of these three things. Because without education, we're not setting our people up for success. Without engineering, in other words, without safe vehicles, without good technology, we're not setting our employees up for success. And then enforcing. So enforcing for a carrier or a company is having the policies, the programs to hold drivers accountable and to act on when people are doing things risky. So what we found over the course of all of our research, looking at what actually works and what doesn't work, it kind of comes down to three things. So the first thing that we found to be successful that companies can use to reduce their crashes is, number one, making sure you develop a culture to improve roadway safety. So I'm sure all of your companies, whether you are primarily transportation focused, or whether you just have driving, as part of your employee's job, it's important to make a culture that focuses on road safety. A lot of times when we go out to companies, they have a great safety culture at a job site or on a workplace, but they don't really do too much focusing on how employees get to that job site. We also hear a lot of people say, well, I don't have a roadway safety culture. But the truth is that every company has a roadway safety culture. It could be good or it could be bad. And we want to help you kind of transition from a bad roadway safety culture to a good one where road safety is really valued and incorporated into overall performance management. And your safety culture is going to touch everything. It's going to touch, who you're hiring, how you're training your employees to be safe on the road, when you're training those employees, how you manage those performances of those employees when it comes to driving, because it is important. Even if you have construction workers, it's important to talk about driving safety and have that as part of their performance review process. It also touches on how you maintain your vehicles and the schedules that you assign your employees. So another big question that we get is, okay, I know it's important to develop a strong, positive safety culture in terms of driving. How do I get people to buy in, right? How do I change my culture? How can I make it better? First thing to think about is getting the buy-in. Without buy-in from both the top of the organization and kind of those frontline individuals, safety culture is going to be really hard to change. So in terms of just changing safety culture, it starts at the top, right? Without the executives, without the management team bought in to the importance of road safety, it's going to be really hard to change the beliefs, the attitudes of everyone else in the organization about being safe behind the wheel on the road. When we talk about getting buy-in from kind of the drivers or from your employees, they like to see that the management, the leadership team actually walks a talk. So if your company has a policy related to driver distraction, it's important for your management team to also follow that same policy. You can't make exceptions just because the owner of the company or the manager has to be driving too and thinks that they can talk on the phone while driving, but you don't allow other people to do it. Your drivers, your employees will see that. So it's important for everyone to follow the same policy. We also know that sharing data on driving risks and driving crash with all employees also helps to highlight the importance of road safety, that the company itself is focusing on it and tracking that data. By sharing the information, people just have better visibility to how their driving impacts everyone else. And then talking about safety, it's really important. The more we talk about driving safety, the more people are going to internalize it. Think about it when they're getting behind the wheel. But, just having management and the executive team talking about road safety isn't all. We have to incorporate the driver or the employee into your program. So ask for feedback. Ask your employees, what do they see when they're behind the wheel driving your fleet vehicle? What parts of the city or the town where you're operating do they have problems? Where's the road work? Are there any situations that they face that are a hindrance to their road safety? But not only just seek their feedback, act on it, listen to it, try to incorporate their feedback to make your operation safer. Incentivizing the process for safety is important. And gamifying safety, having drivers kind of track their own behavior. Again, it's really important, and it can help get people excited about being safe behind the wheel. Also, in terms of culture, in the United States and really across the world, everyone really is just focusing on following the rules of the road to not get caught. That's called other directed accountability. And we don't want our employees just to be safe behind the wheel because they're fearful of being caught. In fact, we want them to drive safe because it's the right thing to do, because we want them to come back to the workplace at the end of the day or to the next day uninjured and drive their vehicle. So we are trying to encourage people to be self-directed in terms of being accountable for their driving performance. So the way we do that is encourage and recognize people's participation in road safety. We consider other factors that may be influencing their driving decisions, such as a tight schedule or running behind on deliveries or on worker orders. Those things can encourage people to do things unsafe, like driving too fast or running through stoplights. So just consider these other factors as well. Helping drivers and employees make goals and providing feedback. All of these things can help people move from only being safe on the road because they're going to get caught to I'm going to be safe because it's the right thing to do and I want to do it. So the second strategy that we know in terms of road safety is focus on behavior. So if we look at all the things that cause events to happen, driver behavior is by far the leading contributing factor to causing crashes. Now, that doesn't mean weather, the vehicle, the road design, all these things play a factor too, but really at the end of the day, it's driver behavior. That's what the research has really found for the past 50 years is that driver behavior is what leads to the vast majority of events on the road. So the companies that we talked and we help with that are successful at improving their road safety culture and their number of events on the road, they focus on leading indicators of risk. And these are kind of the at-risk behaviors that people do behind the wheel, such as speeding, such as tailgating, weaving in and out of traffic, being distracted, driving while they're tired. These are kind of the leading indicators that we can find that predict the more serious events. In other words, the more somebody speeds, the more likely they're going to be involved in an event that's associated with speeding, right? So focus on those leading indicators, try to tackle them, try to address them to prevent those more serious things that happen down the road. Also, it's important to kind of think about, what's prompting those risky behaviors and also what's reinforcing it. Because usually people aren't just doing things that are risky just because. Usually there's competing things that are going out on. So maybe it's your policies that are encouraging people to speed, or maybe it's your policies that are encouraging people to use a phone while driving because they feel like they have to attend a call, they have to answer a call from a supervisor, or they have to join a meeting. So think about, what the company's doing that may encourage people to do things that are risky, and also, what's keeping them doing it, what's reinforcing their behavior. And then once you kind of understand that, you can start to make changes. So we've done a lot of research over the years at the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute, looking at what behaviors actually lead to events. And what we know is that people have performance errors behind the wheel, they make decision errors, and they have recognition errors. So when we do our research at the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute, we put cameras in vehicles. We have accelerometers, radars, a bunch of computer equipment in there, and we just watch what people do when they're in their own vehicle or they're in their fleet vehicle. And this allows us to get detailed data on what people do right before they're involved in a safety-related event, whether that's a close call or a crash. And then we can compare how often they're doing that risky behavior right before that safety event compared to all the other times they're driving when nothing else is happening. So this allows us to get we call it an odds ratio, which is essentially just an increase in risk. But it also allows us to figure out, how often are people doing it? So what you can see here is just a list of driver behaviors that we have found over the years to be associated with an increased risk of being involved in a safety-related crash. So this left column is the driver behavior. The middle column is just the increase in crash risk or risk of being involved in a close call. And that last column is just how often we see it in the data. And you can see some pretty big numbers here in that middle column. So when we collect our data and we analyze it, if we can tell a driver, doesn't have much experience with the road that they're on or the route that they're driving or their vehicle, what we see is that those people are over 200 times more likely to be involved in a close call or a crash compared to when they are familiar with that vehicle or with the road they're on. So that's huge, right? But at the same time, kind of makes sense. If we see people, looking for directions, trying to figure out if they look like they're lost or confused, that's when people start to make mistakes and make last minute adjustments to their vehicle. So this result kind of makes sense. It's just logical. Other things we see, right-of-way error. When people violate their right-of-way, they are almost 1,000 times more likely to be involved in a safety related event. And again, that kind of just makes sense. If we're driving down the wrong side of the road, we're going to be much more likely to be involved in a crash, right? Other really big one here is just sudden or improper braking. Again, really big numbers. The last thing I'll point out on this slide is that last column, the prevalence, how often we see it. You can see those percentages are really low, which makes me feel good, right? Most of the time, people are following the law. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's just when they decide or when they make an error, when they make a mistake, that's when the risk goes up. Judgment error. So these are things that people are deciding to do, right? So being aggressive, speeding, illegal passing, following too close, intentionally violating stop signs or stoplights. Again, the research backs up what we all learned. When people drive aggressive, they're 34 times more likely to be involved in a safety related event. When people speed, they're 12 times more likely to be involved in a safety related event. And when we are doing our data reduction, our analysis, we aren't looking at speeding like 1 or 2 or 3 miles per hour above the speed limit. We're looking at kind of the more excessive speeding. So our threshold is 10 miles above the posted speed limit. So this is where we're seeing, a lot of the risk. But again, these are things we learned back in our driver improvement classes. But the data does show that when people do these risky things, they're more likely to be involved in an event out on the road. And again, on this slide, you can see most of the time people are not doing these risky things. Usually, they're just driving along, they're doing things right. But again, it's when people do make decisions to drive aggressive, to speed, to tailgate. That's when we see these individuals more likely to be involved in a close call or a crash. Um, and attention, right? It's huge. We all have phones, right? Um, the phone is a big risk behind the wheel. So we have been focusing on driver distraction at the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute for a really long time. A lot of our studies have been used by states to implement driver distraction regulation. It's been used by the federal government for commercial motor vehicle carriers to eliminate or ban texting while driving, right? And what we found across pretty much every study we have is that there is a very strong relationship between those tasks that take our eyes off the road and hands off the wheel and our risk of being involved in an event. And that's what this graph here shows. All of those tasks down on the bottom, talking or texting, talking with the passenger, looking at a map, looking in the back seat, looking at the speedometer. All of those are tasks that people do behind the wheel, that we see in our research people do. That blue line you see is the odds ratio. So that's just the increase in risk. The red line is how long people are looking away from the road when they're completing those tasks. And what you can see is that there's a relationship between that blue line and the red line. Over on the left side of the screen, you can see kind of the red line's at its highest and the blue line's at its highest. So in other words, that's where our eyes are off the road. And that's also where we are most likely to be involved in an event. In fact, what we see is with text messaging, the average text message takes our eyes off the road for over 4 seconds. So you can imagine driving your vehicle 65 miles per hour down the road and not looking ahead for 4 seconds. You're going to miss a lot of information. A lot of things can happen during that time. So of course, we're at a big increase in risk. But other things that take our eyes off the road for longer periods of time, like dialing a phone, personal grooming. So this could be adjusting our clothes. It could be shaving or putting on makeup, which we see. It could be combing our hair. All of this stuff, takes our eyes off the road, in this case, for over 4 seconds. Again, increase in crash risk. What it comes down to is that over the years, what we see is that things that take our eyes off the road for more than 2 seconds is where crash risk really starts to go up. And this is why the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has given car developers, truck developers guidance on if your kind of display in your vehicle takes people longer than 2 seconds to look at, it's not safe and they don't allow it. So just think of this, any task that your drivers are doing, that takes our eyes or the hands off the wheel for more than 2 seconds, that's when the risk really, really starts to go up. And those are things that you can focus on as your company and things that you can train them on. Technology is also really big. There's more technology available now in your vehicle and as an aftermarket device that can improve driver behavior. So these things are like forward collision warning or automatic emergency braking, blind spot warning. All of these kind of warning devices are really, really good. We have done the research on them. They work to reduce crashes. So what we recommend and what we talk to fleets about is when you're going out and purchasing new vehicles, look for these features on the vehicles, spec them in because they do work. They can serve as a backup to your drivers to help keep them safe if they do make an error when they're behind the wheel. So we talked about culture. You got to have the culture first, right? Focusing on behavior. The third key strategy is driver training, but not just any driver training, doing useful driver training and then following up with that training after the fact. What we know is that that follow-up is really important. So I include driver training as one of the three key things is because if our drivers don't know how to be safe, they don't know why it's important to be safe behind the wheel, they're not going to do it. They're not going to do what we ask them. So they have to know, how to be safe, why it's important to be safe, and the expectation of being safe behind the wheel. This reinforces that culture of roadway safety and reinforces the value that you place as your organization on roadway safety. What we also know is not just for new drivers. It's really important to educate and train all drivers over the years because people do become complacent. People revert back to old habits. So just training both new employees and old employees does help to reinforce the importance of being safe behind the wheel. And what we see is that we can leverage technology. There's a lot of online training available. We can watch videos. We can use learning management systems. We can use simulators if we get really advanced to help our drivers be safe. And what we found in our research is that all of this technology can be effective at helping people be safe behind the wheel. We know that training actually works. A study by the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health looked at a lot of different practices that people do to help prevent crashes. They found that there was a relationship between training and a reduction in crashes across a lot of different companies. They found in this study that training for new hires was effective, refresher training for all drivers was effective, and then just kind of like any training for anybody, again, was effective. So this is good. The data backs up that training does work. This graph just shows a study that we did looking at kind of an automated training program. We follow drivers for 18 weeks before they receive training. You can see kind of rates of risky behaviors, such as hard braking or excessive speeding. Then we implemented training, and we actually found a pretty significant drop in risky behaviors. This one study in particular, we found a 70% reduction in speeding after focusing and implementing a training. So that's pretty important. That's pretty good, right? So what do we focus on with training? Well, the first thing is, again, making sure people know expectations, right? We have to provide expectations on what people do and what they're supposed to do when they're driving their fleet vehicle. Focusing the training on what actually vehicles they're going to be driving, right? It's really important. Kind of focus training on the routes or the localities that they're going to be driving in. Distraction is really important because I just showed that, people are distracted and it is related to risk and being involved in a crash or a near crash. Then also fatigue management. All of us can get tired on our job, on the job site, and then we get into a vehicle and we can get tired after the fact. So when you're looking at driver training programs, look at your fleet. What are kind of common factors that you are seeing in your organization? Where are your incidents occurring? How frequently are you seeing them, or how serious are they? Do you see differences in drivers or in different types of fleet vehicles you may have within your organization? But again, as I kind of mentioned at the offset of this topic, is follow-up is really, really important with driver training. We did a study, we've done a couple studies over the years looking at implementing training and what are people doing after that. And what we found, and this graph is showing that, this company implemented a training program or driver coaching. Some of those drivers had follow-up after the fact. And you can see here those two bars on the left, that really tall blue bar and the red bar right next to it. Those are people before and after receiving a training with coaching following up. They had a huge reduction in safety events, actually about a 75% reduction in safety related events because they got the coaching. Now, those other two bars are people who didn't get follow-up. They kind of just got a training, nothing ever happened after that. They didn't improve, right? They did not get safer. They didn't stop doing other things. So that's really important. We need to implement something and then follow up on it. That's holding people accountable for what they're doing behind the wheel. So kind of just to summarize my aspect, if you guys have people driving a fleet vehicle, driving is actually probably one of the most risky things they're going to be doing on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of times people don't really think about it. They focus on, going out on the work site. They focus on the manual tasks that their employees are doing. But really it's driving this, several thousand pound up to several tens of thousands of pound vehicle down the road is really risky. And we have to help our drivers understand the importance and the risk of that. Reducing road incidents starts with culture. You have to have that culture to value the importance of being safe behind the wheel. Focusing on behavior, right? If we're looking at, the low-hanging fruit there, it's looking at driver behavior. What are your drivers doing behind the wheel? And targeting countermeasures, targeting programs to address that driver behavior, one of which is the education and the training to help make sure that people understand and have the skills that they need to be safe and the knowledge of why it's important for them to be safe when they're driving either their personal vehicle for work or your fleet vehicle. So with that, thank you guys. I'll be around for questions. I think we'll probably hold questions until the end. Be more than happy to answer anything based on the research side. But with that said, I think it's a pretty good kind of transition into Michael here. So Michael is going to be talking about a new series that the National Safety Council has kind of put together called Fleet Essentials. So with that, Michael, I'll pass it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Matt. And thanks to Virginia Tech Transportation Institute for all the work you're doing to save lives on our roadways. My name is Michael Giroux, and I'm the program manager for roadway product safety at the National Safety Council. What we have today is a really exciting suite of products that addresses a lot of what you've discussed today. It's known as the Fleet Essentials product line, and it's based fundamentally on the DDC course and professional truck driver course. As Matt shared with us earlier, vehicle crashes are the #1 cause of work-related death, and they account for 37% of all fatal injuries. So we have a real opportunity to save lives, and with an annual cost of $72 billion to companies, we can also save money spent on things like vehicle repairs, insurance premiums, and catastrophic legal settlements. This solution can be used to enhance your roadway safety culture as it addresses the factors Matt discussed earlier in performance errors, judgment errors, and inattention. Moreover, the Fleet Essentials Suite can be used as just-in-time or remedial training to recalibrate your employees' driving behaviors. We recommend that after completing the defensive driving course or professional truck driver, your employee then completes driving professionally, distracted fleet driver, and vehicle dynamics. For the defensive driving course, either non-commercial or professional truck drivers, the content should teach defensive driving strategies to reduce motor vehicle collisions, the effects of drugs, alcohol, and physical and mental conditions on driving, how to deal with distracted, aggressive, and fatigued driving, and conditions that impact driving and how to control them, as well as the importance of occupant safety devices. Drivers who complete a defensive driving course, the core Fleet Essentials courses, and then a vehicle-specific course can provide their employees with the NSC Safe Vehicle Operator designation. Employers can set a validity period for the designation and should require additional ongoing training to maintain. Fleet managers can use citations or ticketing, incidents, crashes, and telematics data prior to training assignment to determine retraining frequencies. Let's look at each of these courses. Driving professionally is about 20 minutes long. Fleet drivers and those who drive for work need a unique set of skills, knowledge, good judgment, and high ethical standards. Fleet drivers must recognize the hazards and challenging situations encountered on the road and identify specific techniques they can use to handle those situations. Additionally, one area that professional drivers sometimes overlook is their state of mind. Driving is a complex task that requires full concentration and a calm mind. In this course, drivers will learn the definition of a fleet driver and why fleet drivers must drive professionally. Specifically, this course will dispel myths about fleet drivers, review the key characteristics of professional fleet drivers, and cover strategies employees can use to represent your company well while operating a fleet vehicle. Understand what it means to be a professional driver, recognize the definition of a fleet driver, understand the implications of driving professionally, identify the added responsibilities of a fleet driver, and identify the key responsibilities of a professional fleet driver. Distracted driving is dangerous, claiming more than 3,000 lives in 2020. Distracted driving is any activity that diverts attention from driving, including talking or texting on your phone, eating and drinking, talking to people in your vehicle, fiddling with the stereo, entertainment, or navigation system, really anything that takes your attention away from the task of safe driving. Employees cannot drive safely unless they are attentive, alert, and engaged in the driving task. Any non-driving activity employees engage in is a potential distraction and increases your risk of crashing. In this course, employees will learn why it's important to remain distraction-free and how to minimize distractions while driving the fleet vehicle. Specifically, drivers will learn the science of distracted driving, myths about multitasking, the effects of distracted driving on driving performance, the unique sources of driver distractions for the fleet driver, how to eliminate distractions in the fleet vehicle, and signs of distracted drivers operating around the fleet vehicle. Vehicle dynamics course is about 40 minutes. Fleet drivers and those who drive in the course of their work have likely been driving for several years. This program is not meant to teach employees how to drive, but provides information so they can improve the way they interact with any vehicle that they operate, from the workplace to any place. In this course, we'll look at all sizes and types of vehicles and provide drivers with knowledge and perspective they may not have learned before. As you can imagine, a box truck or step van handles very differently than a compact car or sedan. The goal of this course is to provide learners with a better understanding of the dynamics of vehicles that affect how the vehicle operates. In this course, drivers will learn the importance of vehicle familiarization and physical forces such as inertia, gravity, and velocity and how they impact vehicle handling. They will also learn to look at vehicle characteristics they should be aware of to avoid risky maneuvers while on the road. We take an in-depth look at vehicle dynamics, including yaw, pitch, and roll. Finally, we look at your vehicle's abilities and those limitations. Once they've completed those 3 core courses, they will take a vehicle-specific course. The first one we've rolled out is passenger vehicle. Research shows drivers are more likely to be involved in crashes when operating unfamiliar vehicles. This includes operating fleet vehicles, even when the fleet vehicles are similar to a driver's personal vehicle. However, there are slight variations in vehicle technology, size, height, length, width, make, and model that can result in differences in performance dynamics. Without understanding these differences, fleet drivers may be at an increased risk of being in a crash, including crashes resulting from the 6 deadly choices. Experienced fleet drivers are aware that their decisions can prevent incidents. By comprehending the workings of their passenger vehicle, they can make decisions to evade avoidable collisions. This training program aims to refresh their knowledge of passenger vehicle dynamics, thereby minimizing the chances of incidents resulting from driver error, vehicle upkeep, and environmental factors. After finishing this course, employees will have a better understanding of how driver decisions impact crash rates and will be able to identify the various factors that contribute to incidents. Additionally, learners will acquire techniques to prevent driver-related crashes, learn how to conduct pre- and post-trip vehicle inspections, and gain insight into strategies aimed at avoiding environmental-related incidents. This module ties into the previous modules, and it will refresh on the 6 deadly choices, including violating another driver's right-of-way, breaking the speed limit, distracted driving, driving across the center line, making improper turns, and tailgating or following too closely. This suite of products is available in an online e-learning format. The courses are playable on PC, laptop, tablets, and phones. The content is designed using a modern, immersive, and engaging approach for adult learners, including scenarios, 3D animations, and knowledge feedback exercises. Learners can bookmark their progress and exit and return to the course as needed. All courses include closed captioning and audio narration to support learning styles. Each course also includes an end-of-course review to check the learner's understanding. Managing your drivers and vehicles to avoid significant liabilities is critical in both human and financial terms. Given that your organization has the proper management support for safe driving, your drivers and all employees should benefit from training. In addition, the costs of training in time, money, and effort are minimal compared to the benefits realized. Reduce number of incidents and costs related to these incidents. This includes reducing vehicle repair, medical care, and insurance costs. Reduced repair, maintenance, and vehicle replacement costs. Drivers who have knowledge of their vehicle's mechanical limitations and adopt a proactive approach to vehicle management are more likely to take better care of their vehicles and work collaboratively with fleet and maintenance departments. Reduced supervisory burden. Training lets drivers know the organization's performance standards. When there is clarity around job objectives, it is more likely that people will follow them. Training also acts as the foundation for taking corrective measures if required. In some cases, providing drivers with necessary training in processes, procedures, and skills can protect employers from legal action if disciplinary action leads to termination. A well-trained driver usually requires less supervision because of understanding job standards and how to achieve them without constant reminders. Improved overall job performance. The aim of any training program, regardless of its content, is to bring about behavioral change. Employees who receive training better understand their job and fleet-related concerns. This involvement increases job satisfaction, lower absenteeism, and turnover rates. Effective training can enhance a driver's job performance and directly impact the organization's efficiency and effectiveness. For instance, developing better work habits in essential areas can boost drivers' confidence and improve their interactions with customers, coworkers, and management personnel. Improving the driver's perception of themselves and the organization can transform the company's culture and result in greater ownership, affecting the treatment of your company's vehicles. Finally, improved customer and public relations. As the daily point of contact between customers and motorists, the driver represents the organization. By receiving good training, drivers can gain self-awareness, develop their skills, and become more motivated, positively impacting the organizational culture. This training also directly impacts how drivers interact with people outside of the organization, making it a good investment for any organization. Improved performance resulting from good training is noticeable and reflects positively on the driver, the organization, and the industry. We are so excited to roll out this Fleet Essentials training that is ready for use now. Next month, we'll be expanding the program with vehicle-specific modules of medium-duty trucks and delivery vehicles. If you have questions or want more information, you can go to the website, nsc.org/fleet. You can also email us directly at fleet@nsc.org. Thank you so much.
That's great, Mike and Matt. Thank you very much. We do have a number of questions that have come in. We'll try to answer as many as we can in the time remaining before the top of the hour. Just a reminder, if you do have a question, please enter it into the Q&A utility, and we'll be happy to try to get to it. Some of the questions are clearly related to Mike's portion, and some are clearly related to Matt's portion. One question I've seen from a few people, kind of an overall thing. We will be sharing a link to the recording of this webinar and the deck. And there will also be a survey when we're all done here, if you could take the minute to fill it out. With that, Mike and Matt, would it be helpful if I read off the questions from the chat instead of having you hunt for them?
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Okay, great. I think quick questions about Fleet Essentials training. We got from a few people. Mike, is the course available in both Spanish and English?
Yeah, great question. So NSC is moving towards a platform where all of our training is going to be available in multiple languages, which includes English and Spanish.
Great. There's a question about the price point for those courses. Is the best place for them to look the website, Mike, or should they just email you at that fleet address?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different price points depending on your relationship with NSC, but also there's volume discounts. So we can really provide training to one person or to 1,000 or more employees. So check out the website. If you have specific questions, you can email us directly at fleet@nsc.org. And we're happy for one of our client safety solution members to get in touch with you directly if you need specific numbers.
Great. Thanks, Mike. And while we still have your ear, are there any demos to look at for the course or interactive features to expect or get a look at?
Yeah, so there's a couple options. You can email us directly and we can get you demo access, or you can go to nsc.org/shop. And your fleet manager or executives can buy one of the courses and review that individual course. There's also some different packages for the courses. So to get the safe vehicle driver designation, they would need to take either PTT or DDC, and then buy the module package of the 3 modules plus one of the vehicle specifics. So there's lots of different options available.
Great. And then I think this last 2 questions about the training, and then switch back to Matt here. Can the Fleet Essentials training courses be uploaded in or linked to the company's MLS?
Yeah, great question. So there's lots of opportunity there. As with our current DDC products, generally those additional benefits start at 100 registrations or 100 licenses or above, and our client safety solution team is ready and prepared and trained to discuss those options with you.
Great. And then I think last question on fleet training, is there a train the trainer program available?
Not for Fleet Essentials because it is all web-based at this point.
Okay, thank you. Let's pivot back to Matt. Matt, have any studies been done for fleet cameras and telematics? How much risk is reduced by implementing this type of program versus not having this technology in the vehicle? And are there any companies VT would recommend?
Yeah, great question. So we've done a lot of research on video telematic systems and also just traditional non-video telematic system. And the research is pretty strong in that they work. However, there's a big caveat to that. You can't implement a telematics program and expect it to be a silver bullet. Like, it's just a data collection device. That's all they are, right? It's just collecting information on what drivers are doing. So this gets into the follow-up. You have to look at the data. You have to act on the data to help drivers improve and to hold them accountable. What we found over the years is that when companies implement a telematics device and they don't do anything, driver behavior doesn't change. And then on top of that, you have a really strong liability issue, because if that driver or your company gets involved in an event and you're collecting data and it shows that you knew, your data showed that you had a driver that was doing things risky, but you didn't act on it, it's a big problem, right? Across all the studies, we've done research looking at video telematics. We've seen 35% reduction in safety related events. I did a study a couple years ago. We saw that a company that implemented video telematics amongst other culture safety improvement programs, they saw a 75% reduction in risky driving. So these are really big numbers. The technology works. You just have to act on it. You can't just expect it just to magically make your fleet safer. You have to actually use the data. In terms of companies that VT recommends, so the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute, we don't endorse any products, right? We just do research. We're an independent third-party organization. There are a lot of video telematics companies out there. So I'd recommend, just looking around and looking at what your needs are in your fleet and seeing, what technology can meet the needs of your company.
Great, thanks. Next question, Matt. What specific kinds of coaching were used? Face-to-face, email, text message, and what frequency? There were a couple of questions actually about recommended frequency of training.
Yeah, so in that study, it was face-to-face. We know that just face-to-face interactions, are a little bit better, but depending on your operation, it can be really hard, right? And sometimes we don't see our employees very often. So I think any type of coaching is better than none. But that study in particular was face-to-face coaching. And in terms of frequency, that study, it was about every week following up on the previous week's behavior. And what we know is that the closer we can provide feedback to a risky event, the more likely it is that coaching or that feedback is going to be effective. If we wait for a month after somebody did something risky, it doesn't really do us any good, right? We need to kind of be pretty frequent and be pretty responsive to it. But again, we don't need to do it every day, probably. So pretty frequent, but I think it was about once a week in that study.
Great, thanks. Another question, Matt. How pervasive is safety technology? For example, auto braking, blind spot warning on commercial vehicles like delivery vans and box trucks.
Yeah, so those class 3 to class 6 vehicles like step vans, box trucks, delivery vans, it is slower. It's less pervasive compared to all the other types of vehicles, whether they're passenger cars or the class 7 and 8 traditional tractor trailers. However, they are becoming more prevalent. In fact, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration right now is proposing a new regulation that any vehicle class 3 and up, so that's anything over 10,000 pounds, is going to be equipped with automatic emergency braking. And it's not retroactive, so you don't have to go in and put it in your vehicle, but it's basically like any new class 3 or heavier vehicle is going to have it. So it's becoming more prevalent because the data is pretty clear that they work.
Great, thanks. Do you have accident stats for fleet drivers in marketing and sales role, not fleet drivers in delivery vans? I would like to compare our company's performance with external performance for this type of fleet driver.
Yeah, so we at VTTI, we do not have that data available to us. With that said, the Bureau of Labor Statistics that tracks, the fatal injuries and the non-fatal injuries, they break down their categories in pretty finite detail. So that data on a national level may be available. I will also call out the Network of Employers for Traffic Safety. It's called NETS. Basically, it's kind of like NSC. It's for people who do, really value road safety as part of their organization. Can join NETS. I do know that NETS has a benchmarking report every year where they break down rates of road events based on different industries. So if you are a member of NETS, that information is probably there. And if not, maybe you could reach out to look into it.
Great, thanks. Regarding age groups and safety performance, are there differences? And if so, do you address as a collective group, all drivers, or by age group?
There are differences in age groups. And what we know is that younger drivers, and we're talking about, under 18 drivers, are at a greater risk, and then also older drivers. So when we look at the risk profile across all age groupings, it is kind of is a curve like this. So, middle-aged people aren't very at an increased risk for road safety. It's more the younger people and the older people. However, with that said, there's a big factor that kind of is correlated with that, and that's experience. And what we found, we've done a lot of research looking at occupational drivers and age and experience. And what we find is that actual experience is more important than age, because you can imagine you can have a 40 to 50-year-old driver been driving their personal vehicle their entire lives, but then they get into a brand new type of vehicle that may be 30,000 pounds heavier than their passenger vehicle. It's very, very different. It operates very differently, and they have zero experience. They're going to be at an increased risk of being involved in an event when they're driving that type of vehicle. So experience is really important in terms of risk.
Great, thanks. Not sure if you addressed this one yet, Matt. Do you suggest training on a yearly basis? If not, how often do you suggest retraining?
Yeah, that's a little tricky, and I think it's fleet by fleet and almost even driver by driver. Yeah, we haven't looked at that specifically. NSC, again, we don't endorse any type of training program. NSC is just one of the ones out there. NSC might have some recommendations on that, and maybe Michael, you can talk a little bit about that. But I'd say, every 3 years, like, people revert back to old habits, and every 3 years seems like it's not too frequently, but again, it's refreshing. One thing we do know is that we can do frequent trainings like every week or every month, and a training can just be like a quick like snippet of like, here's a seasonal topic such as driving in very cold weather, like a lot of the country is having right now, driving on black ice, or clearing your car in the snow, like even like really little like bits of information every week or every month can be really useful too.
Great, thanks. And I think we've got time for one more question. That is, if you can answer it, what is the average amount of time a fleet manager must dedicate responding to telematics with a 600 vehicle fleet across the country?
That's a big challenge that we hear very, very often. It's the data overload from these technologies. There's not a great answer that's going to fit every solution. A lot of technology providers have been working on their dashboards and their reporting features to help give fleet managers actionable insights into what's happening out on the road and what their drivers are engaged in. Unfortunately, I don't have a great answer for that, other than try to maybe work with your telematics provider, work with your managers to kind of find that kind of sweet spot into, looking at the data, acting on it when there's problems, or when you see trends, versus like that's all they do every single day.
Great, thanks, Matt. And just being respectful of everybody's time, we're just about at the top of the hour. I think Mike just dropped into the chat the email address that's specifically geared for Fleet Essentials. If we did not get to your question during this call, we're going to look through the transcript and see if we missed yours, and then we would follow up with you. The landing page address for Fleet Essentials is also www.nsc.org/fleet. That's pretty easy. And as I say, Mike dropped his email into the chat here for follow-up questions. We will be sending out the recording and the deck after this. Zoom also sort of auto sends out an email that will serve, I think, for those of you who've inquired about certificates of attendance to this webinar. And I think with that, I'd like to thank our presenters today, as well as everybody who has taken an hour to talk about fleet safety. Great discussion. Thanks, everybody.